just south of Nashville, Tennessee, about 30 miles. Actually heard about the call last week at the XP conference. Derek Goot put me onto it, and man, I'm just
Derek,
excited. I'm excited to listen. He told me that this is probably the most productive hour of work he has every month. So I'm excited to make that my productive hour.
Love
that's a
it,
lot
man.
of pressure, Goot. That's a lot of
It
pressure,
is.
Derek.
That's a lot of pressure. I want Rob. We got Rob Henry to say hello. Tell us about himself.
Hey everybody. Yep, my name is Rob. I'm in Olympia, Washington. Just moved down here in November following almost 10 years in youth ministry and a bunch of hospitality work before that. Kind of in an associate role, doing a lot of stuff at our church with trajectory to be executive pastor in the next couple of years. My lead pastor was a part of this crew for a while and just spoke highly of it and got me connected in. So excited to be here.
Awesome, man. We're glad you're here. My grandmother was from Olympia, Washington. So rep, I've been there many times. And then let's hear from Brian, who unfortunately Chris Call referred him, but Brian, we won't hold that against him.
Man, gosh.
Yeah. Hey, Brian Drinkwine. I'm at Breakthrough Church in Southern California, Corona in Riverside County. And so Chris got me connected, and I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. And Brian, your last name is Drinkwine. I just want to point that out. I'm sure no one else has pointed that out, but that's.
I don't know how I feel about that. Like we're Christians
impressive.
here.
Feel good.
That's impressive.
Feel good about it.
And
this church is in Corona.
Cigar on the call, so you should probably be drinking wine just to match up with your name. So glad you're here, man.
Yeah.
Is there anybody else new that maybe we just didn't catch? Just jump in, unmute, and just introduce yourself real quick. We won't spend forever here, but I want to make sure you guys feel like we know who you are.
Brian Eves, Mission Viejo, California, Orange County, California.
I want to be Brian. I want to be Brian right now.
We all do. We all do.
Awesome. Anybody else? Cool. Awesome. All right. I'm going to screen share real quick. Brandon and I are going to split this up today. So we're gonna split this in half, and he's going to lead out. I'm going to lead out kind of the beginning conversation, and then he's going to lead out the secondary conversation. And part of what we want to do today is really one of the things that we talk about a lot with our Growmentum network, and you guys are a part of, is this idea to the point where you kind of start to go, but you also, every time you hear it, you embrace it, is this tension that we always talk about between on it and in it, right? Like the idea of like, we want to make sure that there's that right rhythm of the on it and in it. Just for quick review, one of the things that we always say there as well is, the in it will always be more demanding than the on it, right? You will always drift. If you're undisciplined, you're always going to drift to the in it. The stuff that maybe we affirm more, or the to-do list where we feel good at the end of the day because we check it all off. And so unfortunately, there's something in all of us that knows that the on it, and when I say on it, when we say on it, we mean like that 35,000 feet, getting up out of the daily task and actually analyzing, what I like to say is realigning, right? We talked about this last call. If you missed it, go back to the April call. We talked about the idea that alignment drifts almost automatically. So if you had a staff meeting this week and you said, man, I killed that, Joel killed that, Doug killed it, we killed the staff meeting, everybody knows where we're headed. By the time they walked out of your staff meeting, your team was starting to unalign or just misalign already. I don't mean that in a divisive way. It's just that they all walk out and they all heard this and they all go to do that. And as time goes on, there's this leaking, right? So that's why the rhythm of working on it is a constant reality that we have to make sure that we are always paying attention to. So I'm going to talk a little bit. Maybe it's this Spain thing, you guys, so forgive me. I know I'm going to tap into kind of that softer side of Lee that some of you never see and never want to see again, and that's okay. And so what I thought we would do today is, as we kind of head into summer, a lot of people, last day of schools, your school's already out or it's starting to wrap up, talk for half of our time about working on it personally this summer, maybe doing some things, kind of a summer pilgrimage, for lack of a better term, that you can do. And you don't have to go to Spain to do it or go anywhere. Maybe you can go to Mission Viejo and do it with Brian. But, is there something we can do this summer that can be working on it personally? And then we'll have that dialogue. And then I'm going to pivot to Brandon, and he's going to lead us through some practical discussion, or maybe reminders even for some of you, not new, but reminders around what are some real good processes and structures for us to keep our team in a rhythm of working on it around patterns of calendaring, intentionality, conversations, one-on-ones, those things. Cool. So that's what we're going to do. As always, we're in the chat, but let me tell you guys, the bigger these calls have gotten, the more difficult it is for the conversation to not just be one-sided. I really desire for it not to be. We really do. So I want to give you permission. I'm just going to keep talking because I hate silence and it makes me nervous. But if you want to stop, if you disagree, if you want to add a comment, please just unmute and hit it. Don't be polite. We would love for that dialogue. And as always, that dialogue can happen through the chat as well. So if there's something that you want to hit, either Brandon or I will be in the chat and we'll hit that. All right. So let's talk about this thing of, I just want to talk to you guys about leveraging the summer. So let's just call it the next 60 days, right? How can we leverage the summer as leaders to work on it personally and leave the potential for burnout behind, right? And maybe some personal nourishment and longevity. I got a text yesterday from another guy who's tapping out of ministry. 17 years full-time ministry. It was a nice text. It was like, hey, I've had a 17-year run. I'm going to go do something else in the marketplace. That's cool. Like, that's fine. We don't have to, not all of us have to do this forever. That's cool. Some of you are just coming out of the marketplace, but it always gives me pause around what's going on internally in that individual that's not allowing them to continue in something that we believe is, so important, to do. And I think some of it is we have to do the things that really leverage, longevity for us and do those things in our lives. So let's start with the personal. And I'd love for some of you guys to weigh in on helping us understand how you do that. Some of you guys are better at it than others. I'm actually don't consider myself an expert on that. Besides the fact that I just walked for 7 days, that's about as expert as I am. But I want to give you some stuff to think about. Here's a quote from our friend John Ortberg. He's not completely canceled, so we're going to quote him this morning. He says this: anytime you see life flourishing, it is because it is receiving nourishment from outside of itself. Okay. And I read that quote this week and thought that's so interesting, because especially when we are in ministry, there's such a tendency to be so public that we never have time for the private. All right. I'm going to hold up this piece of paper. I know I'm sharing screen, but I've also got a little visual aid today. This paper I've kind of marked on it real elementary, like kindergarten. This represents our interior life as leaders, as people that feel called to ministry, that are following God's calling. But it really represents all of us, because take the leadership away, it's just you and I as people who are following Jesus. This blank side, or this side of it, represents that part of us. This side that I've kind of scribbled on and kind of indicated would indicate that public space that we all live in. All right. And one of the things that's interesting is when we're in ministry, it's really tough to work on this space because we spend so much time in this space, right? So this place of private, like where our soul is, like think about words like our values, our faith, our feelings, they kind of dwell here, right? And then this is like image, influence, impact. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with this. This is just that public thing. What's interesting is when we see like a kid, like a baby or like an infant, it's kind of interesting because those individuals, they literally just show us both, right? Like everything a child thinks, feels, kind of comes out. The inside and the outside, the private and the public, they're just like one. But then something happens to us, you guys, and it happens to us in ministry as well. Is pretty soon we learn early on that if we show too much of this, it's problematic, or we deem it to be problematic, right? We can't reveal that. We get injured, we get hurt. And so what do we do, you guys? I mean, if you had one of these, you just pull it up and put it across your eyes. I would call it our walling or our compartmentalizing of our lives. And in ministry leadership, it is such a huge deal, right? Where it's like, this is what we want people to see, and this is who we are behind, and nobody sees that. So we put this wall up and we just keep it there and we don't let them see it. You guys are all pastors or leaders on this call. So I'm not really trying to preach at you, except for the fact that you're already reaching the application point with what I'm sharing with you, right? It's just this idea of some of you are living there right now, right? And so what the reason I wanted to share this is because when we compartmentalize our public and private, I think burnout is more of a possibility, right? Because we're not living in an authentic place. We're not living in the heart of our soul. John Mark Comer talked about burnout on a podcast recently. And one of the brilliant things that I thought he said was, he said, exhaustion is different than burnout. That exhaustion is typically something that happens physically in your body where you're tired. And exhaustion we can typically deal with get some sleep, get some rest, get some sun, come to Vegas, hang out, get some sun, go to eat better, work out, go for a walk, take a vacation, rest our bodies. That's exhaustion, right? You can do that. What he said, and I believe is true, is that burnout does not dwell in that space. It dwells in the emotional and the spiritual and the mental space. And so that's why you can go on vacation, or you can go take a nap for 12 hours and still feel burnout, or the potential for burnout, because it doesn't live in that physical realm. It lives more in the spiritual realm. And so that's pretty important for us to understand, because some of us think, well, this summer we just need to take a break. And maybe we do, right? Because exhaustion's a real deal. But my point today is, what is your pilgrimage of the summer going to look like to that private place? Okay, now some of us do this, right? So we do this and we circle it up, right? And so we circle it up a little bit and we make sure that there's only a very few people that kind of see this part of us. And that's probably somewhat healthy at times, right? We're pretty protective, we're exclusive, we're inclusive with that. Problem is that only works for a while, because we're still shutting out people on the outside. And Jesus kind of had this thing he said, you guys, maybe you've read it, where he said we're supposed to be the light of the world. Right. And so if we totally shut out the private part of us, then that part of us as a leader, as a Christian spiritual leader, doesn't get out where it's supposed to be. So I don't think this is the answer. Right. But Parker Palmer does something pretty cool. And if you watched Avengers Endgame, they did the same. They used this same technique, but on a different way. If you take this and you fold it this way and you twist one end, it forms what's called a Mobius strip. Mobius. Basically, the interesting thing about this is it was discovered by a guy named August Mobius, which was like a German mathematician back in the day. And it doesn't exist anywhere in the physical world. But here's what makes this Mobius thing. Tony Stark talks about it in Avengers, for all you nerds out there. Here's what makes this very interesting. And I think the spiritual connection will come. If you take your finger and you trace the outside where I've scribbled on the strip, and you say, hey, I'm on the outside, what appears to be the outside, and you keep moving around the outside of the strip, eventually you're going to end up on the inside of the strip, right? Even though you're still tracing and tracking. And if you keep tracking, you're going to eventually end up again on the outside. If you placed an ant and you could train the ant to walk the strip, the ant would be inside and outside, inside and outside. It's really hard to define where the inside starts and the outside starts. And I think that's an amazing picture of what true healthy spirituality and life can look like, and what leadership can look like for all of us. Because what happens in the private place should inform what goes on in the public space, and where we've been placed in the public space should impact who we need to become in our private place, right? Where God has uniquely placed you. And so it isn't like that's my life out there and that's my life in here. It's this, right? It's how do those inform each other, and so they form this strip. I think I got a picture of a really cool one. How does it inform that? And so I wanted to share that with you guys today, because I think there's some things that you guys can imply in your life. And like, I'm not Pete Scazzaro. You guys didn't come on this call to hear about emotionally healthy stuff, all that. There's plenty of guys who are way more experts on that. I just feel like this group of people, because we've been tracking together for so long, there's times where we need to pause and say, yeah, there's strategies and all those things that are involved, but there's times we need to pause and go, none of that stuff, the stuff that Brandon's going to talk about in the next 30 minutes, none of that's going to matter if you burn out. None of that's going to matter if you're faking it, right? And what's going on over here is a freaking mess, right? And so we need the right opportunities to pause as pastors and leaders and get in that private space. Here's what I want to leave you with is this. everything you need in the public space will be given to you in the private place. Okay, so if you can find that private place, everything that you need is going to be there, and you're going to be able to discover that. And you say, well, what does that look like, or what does that look like for me? I have no freaking idea. I'm not going to tell you to go pray for an hour. Some of you can't pray for an hour. It would kill you. It'd be the worst thing for your soul, right? Some of you, like, I don't know what it is that private place for you, but you need to get there. You need to get there more frequently in this summer. You need to prep for the fall and what God's going to do in the fall, as most of you are sensing and feeling a little bit of momentum in your churches. All of that needs to happen. And I don't want to get one more text from any of you on this call like, hey man, I'm tapping out. Hey man, thanks for all your help. I don't want to get that. If God calls you to do something out, that's something else, that's cool. But if it's based on burnout and being fried because we didn't take care of the private place that we need to be, then that's shame on us. All right. So, so get yourself a strip of paper today, fold it this way, tape it up, throw it on your desk, and make sure that we, work on it in the time that we have. I think it's a powerful reminder to me as I was walking, day after day after day. And some of you guys know me well enough to go, I can't even picture that, but it was actually refreshing. The processing that happened as my brain started to calm down and started to breathe a little bit allowed God to speak into that space. I don't have anything profound like boom. I just have a lot of understanding of who I am, identity, a lot more strength, and a lot more courage for whatever is coming. And so I think that gets redefined. Like I said earlier, everything you need in the public space is going to be found there in that private place. So just be aware of that as you think. Anybody want to comment on that? Just real quick.
Yeah, Lee, I've got something. So I did my sabbatical in 2019 and knew I needed some rest. And one of the things that God kind of showed me in that was there was a difference between rest, which was physical, renewment, or rest, refreshment, and renewal. So refreshment was more mental, spiritual and emotional, and then renewal was more mental. And me figuring out which one of those where I really needed, because I engaged those differently. For me, for the refreshment for my spiritual, emotional side, for me, going camping, getting away by myself, is top of the charts for me. And the renewal is, I found I'm a intellectual pathway. And so reading, engaging my mind differently than I do in the day in, day out of struggle of ministry, again, just was really, really helped me process through that.
Yeah, it's great, man. Thanks for sharing that. Somebody else? Anybody? Somebody said emotionally healthy spirituality day by day. Great recommendation. Who recommended that? Whoever recommended that. Josh, was that you or Jeff? Jeff, talk about it real quick, will you? Just take 30 seconds.
The book itself is fantastic as a discipleship tool and as a resource to make us kind of readdress that. But the day by day was a huge thing for me, because basically what the practice is 2 to 3 times a day, spending 2 to 5 minutes in silence and in prayer to just go, let go. And so his personal practice of Peter Scazzero, who you just talked about a second ago, it was that he would do it in the morning, but his lunchtime, he had a lunch section of the day where he would stop and reconnect with God in the middle of the day, in the middle of crazy stuff going on that felt like he needed to accomplish, so that he was rooted and being connected to God in everything else he was doing, as opposed to connecting with God in the morning, getting distracted through the whole day, and then trying to reconnect with God as he was going to sleep at night. So that's what helped. It helped me a ton. I'm still struggling with
Totally get it.
Undistracted myself.
The book is in the chat, you guys. So the book is there. So emotionally healthy spirituality day by day. So if that's something that helps you, or you need that kind of structure, the Henry Nouwen stuff is always great. you know, all those sorts of things. Again, I want to be careful not to recommend too much because everybody's wired a little differently as far as where that comes from. My main concern is like we have to be intentional and be disciplined around it, you know, because this is like a top all day. Please.
I want to make sure that I just want everyone to hear this in the chat. I don't know if everyone sees the chat, but Jeff had just a great line. He said a friend of his said this, just kind of wasting what he said. He said, a friend told me the other day, God doesn't heal, restore, or empower the fake you.
That's great.
And man, that's really good stuff. I think we live in such a world where we've got to be somebody to our whole team. And so often the fake us is what we're working on when we got to work on the real us. That's powerful.
Well,
stuff.
and everything is so public now, right? So most of us in leadership, you're kind of a public figure in your own world, right? But everything's so public with social media now. And, you know, I participate in it. Most of you guys participate in it to some level or degree. There's parts of it that are fun and exciting. But the reality is everything is public, right? We're like obsessed with the public, right? And so it's like, I got a cup of coffee. I got a cortado. The Knights won. Chris Hall worked out again. You know, we get the Instagram, right? We all get to see the stuff. And it's like everything's public. And I don't know, you know, it is what it is. But the reality is there's got to be something that I think that it creates some degree of unhealthy competition with us, right? Between us that does not allow that private place to be as healthy as possible. It's funny because I thought this week as I was walking, it's like, you know, we're all desperate for followers, I guess, in social media. And Jesus was desperate to get away from his followers as often as possible. You know, and so we're dying to gain followers, and he's like, yeah, I need a break from my followers. I'm going to withdraw, you know. So maybe there's something to that as well. Any other comments? We got like 2 or 3 minutes before we pivot. Kevin Cobb, it's good to see you, bro. Any other comments on that or stuff that might be helpful for our group?
You know, Lee, I don't know, like I have a buddy of mine that he mandated what he called dog days for all of his staff, and he was the king of acronyms, but it was a day alone with God. So you had to take a dog day.
Got it.
Once a month, you had to have a dog day, and he said, as you know, everyone had to let their direct report know when that dog day was going to take place, just as a way of creating that rhythm for everybody on staff. I thought that was a really cool idea. We don't do it, but I thought it was a good idea.
Of course. It's like, I'll be really candid. Our staff did a survey here at the Crossing 6 months ago, and there was a lot of chatter around, you know, we need to be more spiritual and, you know, we need more of these things. What's funny is that we do quarterly prayer days that are mandated. So today is actually a prayer day for our team. Literally, we're off campus, and basically the mandate is whatever hours you would normally work, whether you're salaried or hourly, you spend that in some form of spiritual development. But I'm not stupid enough to not know that many of our staff are not taking advantage or not utilizing that day well. So it's a constant tension between we need more of that, and when we give it to you, you don't actually access it, right? And so I'm guilty of it as well at some point too. So I'm guilty as charged. But it's that weird tension that we're like, man, we really want to grow, and I think it kind of leads to that next. So I'll segue us here. Brandon, I know who you are.
Yeah, sir.
Brandon, I'll segue us here real quick. So we want to talk about practical stuff with this work on it, you guys. And one of the things was just that I wanted you guys to ponder, and you might say, yeah, I don't think that's true, but it's just this idea of like expectations. It kind of goes with the expectation of man, you know, we need to spend time and do this and do that. The expectations that if we have expectations, but we don't have intentionality around those expectations, we're going to get super frustrated, right? Because it's just expectations with no real like, hey, we're doing this. And so if we can get some intentionality in both our public and our private and our work on it time, then with the expectations of what we're going to receive to that, we believe there can be at least the opportunity for massive momentum. Plus, there's probably that secret ingredient of discipline that goes along with the intentionality that we're talking about. So we wanted to pivot a little bit and talk about some work on it with your team from the spiritual. So Brandon, why don't you take and talk about that a little bit for a second?
Absolutely. So, you know, great stuff about just the personal side of things. We kind of want to spend a few minutes here on the second half of the call, just talking through kind of our patterns when it comes to our overall team. Not just, and we're not talking necessarily spiritual, we're talking about planning and putting our calendar together and all that. And I think
work on it stuff.
Yeah, the work on it stuff, man. The stuff where you actually pause, take a few, hours, maybe even a day, maybe a couple days, whatever your team is kind of has in that rhythm, and does some long-term planning and really gets out in front of things. Some of you are not great at this. Some of you are. I'd love to know just in the chat what grade you'd give yourself right now, just currently, as far as like when it comes to planning and being out there in front of. Some of you, you're going to give yourself an A because you're like, man, we're working on Easter next year. We got it down. And then there's others of you, you're gonna remember that you need to show a Memorial Day video at 8 p.m. on Saturday night, and you're going to be digging online trying to find that out. And that's just kind of how you're wired. And maybe you need to change that, maybe you don't. But I think just be honest in the chat, man. Are you kind of an A+ when it comes to this deal, or are you like, no, this is something I got to work on. This is something I don't do great in my position. That you might be from the lead pastor chair or the executive pastor chair, but I think you got to do that. So as far as establishing work on it patterns, I think before I jump into the real meat of what I want to talk about, and I appreciate the honesty. I see some C-, maybe D+. I love the honesty in the chat. That's great. That's half the battle, you guys, is actually acknowledging to our team and the people that work around us, like, hey, this is something we need to work on. This is something that we need to get better at. But I think a big step in that is you've got to identify your current planning structure and style. And here's what I mean by that. You've got to own it. Some of your structure. So let's talk about structure for a minute. Some of you are dictators. Like you have a dictatorship style. And what I mean by that is you got one person, maybe it's you, maybe it's your lead pastor. They make all the decisions and everyone else just runs the play. And it's a dictatorship. Everyone knows it. We even sit in planning meetings. But everyone knows at the end of the meeting, the dictator is going to decide, and we're all going to nod our heads and go, yeah, thanks for letting us give input. But the reality is
I call that fake collaboration.
Yes, fake collaboration. Others of you have a democracy. And so you kind of got a team that works on things together, and that team is really the ones who make all the decisions. You're a team. Some of you are like collaborators. You have kind of a bunch of collaboration that goes on in your team, which can be really healthy. Sometimes, though, that can be a lot for you. It can be a lot of frustration, as Lee was talking about earlier, where everyone's got good intentions and, hey, we should do this, and they're throwing all these ideas out there, but no one's really actually putting a plan together and making it happen. And so expectations, it really hurts everybody. So collaboration, not a bad thing, but it can be without the right leader in the room. And then this last one I'll do, and there's many other structures, I'll call it church family. And church family just means, hey, everyone gets a say. I mean, if someone gives negative feedback on the weekend, your lead pastor, or maybe that's you, says, we got to change this. I mean, everyone gets to speak into where we're going. They didn't like it, whoever they are. We listen to they, and everyone in the church family has a say, right down to the church admin, to the lead pastor, to everyone. And it's like everyone's got to be okay. And it's really a false thing, but it just feels like everyone's got to speak into it. So there's kind of a structure that you currently live in. That you do. You have a structure. Some of you are, dictators. Some of you have a democracy. Some of you collaborate. Some of you have this family thing. And I think it's important to identify that structure. And then the thing I really want you to identify, and you can probably make up your own on this, is what is your structure as a leader? What is your structure? What's your style? Okay. So your church has a structure, but you as a leader, what's your style? And maybe you're a lead or an XP, it doesn't really matter. You have a style. Like I know that Lee is a long-term guy. Like I've been working with Lee for a while with Momentum. He is an incredible long-term planner. He's out there. Lee, how far are you guys out at the crossing right now, as far as your planning?
Through our next fiscal year, which is June of 2024.
Yeah, and some of you were like, that made you.
But that was a journey to get there. But now some of you feel like crap. But it was a journey to get there.
Yeah, and for some of you, that just is like, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine. I work in an environment, just so you know, it's a healthy, growing church. We are not a year and a half out. We are not that far out. And so, it's tough. But some people are long term, which is awesome. That's just your preference. Some of you are short term. Yeah, maybe a little shorter. Maybe it's a 3-month stretch you can get out, or 6 months. And that's kind of your typical style. Some of you have what I call the stamp of approval style, which is you don't want to be in the planning meeting. You don't want to sit there with the board and make all the plans in the calendar. You just want everyone else to come up with the idea, and then you give it a stamp of approval. Some of you lead guys, you love to make it your, like if you really like it, you'll make it your idea. But that's your style. You're kind of the stamp of approval. Some of you are last minute and you got to own it. You just got to know, like, hey, this is how I am. Maybe it's about putting different people around you to help you not be so last minute, but you got to know what your style is. Like if you're the last minute person, you're always going from your gut, not from the calendar. You're always changing things last minute, and that's just the norm. Others of you are routine. We don't want to admit it, but we're just stuck in routine. We always do it this way. We've always done it this way. Or you're in an environment that's just stuck in a routine. And then others of you are what I would call buffet pastors, where, man, we're just doing everything to please everybody. We'll do everything. We'll throw it all in the calendar. And so when it comes down to this, working on it and really stepping aside, I just think it's important that you know your structure and you know your style. And so often, if those things are in disagreement with each other, you're going to have all kinds of tension on your team.
Look, Brandon, I just hit the slide. Wasn't that
You're
good?
doing
Did
awesome.
Did you guys all see that? Like,
Let's all give
I just-
Lee a
I-
hand. Let's all give Lee a
Yeah,
solid hand.
we have a need for a pro presenter this weekend. If we could have you fill a spot.
Yes,
my timing's questionable, but eventually it looks good. It gets there.
It's all that planning ahead. It's being
Yes.
way out there.
He's on it. He's on it big time. I love it. So identifying that is so big, you guys. I think so many of us live in a world where we want to pretend, right, that we're something we're not. And maybe you need someone around you who is more of a long-term planner, and you need to give them some control. Or maybe you just need to own up to the fact that, man, I'm so far out there that no one's even, I'm the dictator. No one's even getting a chance to speak into that. So you got to identify your structure and style. And then
Hey, Brandon, pause real quick. I think
Yeah.
for the executive guys on here, there's some lead guys on here for sure. Executive guys, I want to just give like 10 seconds on this. Really good,
Please.
Brandon. Like
Please.
this idea of like, I think you need to know your style. And I think that some of you are frustrated with your style because you're not in control of the style. So my one encouragement to you would be, you have some options, right? You can just blow it up, right? You can go in and make, or you can figure out how do we incrementally do some practical things to create a rhythm of working on it, which Brandon's going to talk about, that will actually lead to this almost by accident. In other words, if you go in and say, we got to get better at calendaring, that may or may not fly. But if you go in and you begin to institute some work on it rhythms that are more just general, higher level, 35,000 feet, some of these symptomatic things of the lack of planning are going to come through that pattern, and they'll begin to be identified. And then whatever style you're working with or whatever style you lead with may begin to change based on the momentum you feel because working on it has become a priority. Does that make sense? So whatever the style is, don't get too stuck in the structural issue. Figure out, is it because we're really working in it too much and we're not actually committing the time to working on it? So Brandon, take us through some of these patterns.
It's really good, Lee. So first one I would say is bouldering your calendar. Bouldering your calendar. And what we're talking about here is, kind of the whole Stephen Covey deal where you put those big rocks in first, right? And instead of just throwing everything on your calendar and saying, hey, we're going to do it all, we're going to, we're going to go after it. That's when it's really good to kind of do that. You've heard us talk about an ROI exercise, and pause and go, hey, let's ROI what we did last year. And let's really pick out the priorities, the things that, man, they are immovable. They're the non-negotiables. You can literally start really simply. And some of you are already there. Some of you have got this and some of you are struggling with it, which is okay. Where it's like, hey, we do Christmas, we do Easter, we do Mother's Day. We're going to nail these big days. But there's also these big moments on the calendar where it's like, man, it's our kickoff of the year. And we just didn't think it through well enough. We didn't think that we didn't create that as a boulder. We kind of last minute thought, oh, you know what? We should probably do something. It's the first of the year. And you're like, wait a second, no one gets here till the third week of January. And you just don't look at your attendance numbers and realize, oh, that's the key weekend that we've got to actually hit. We got to make that a bolder thing on our calendar. We can't miss that. We can't put 7 to 18 different events at that same time. Make sure that you have those non-negotiables figured out in your calendar. So the bouldering your calendar is so important. You've got to have what we talked about this at the XP Summit we had last week, that there's got to be unfiltered conversation at the table. about what are the boulders, like what's really making a difference, what is going to be the things that we're going to put on there. Of course, we're going to do Christmas, Easter, Mother's Day.
That's where the tension is too, Brandon.
Yep.
Angel's on the call. He's in Tri-Cities in Washington. He was texting me yesterday because he just did this. And that's where the tension is going to come in, because everybody on your team is going to love the idea of boulders as long as their things are considered boulders.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what Brandon's talking about really does accompany the ROI conversation of last month in April. If you missed that, go back on the website and grab it. It's worth 30 minutes of listening to. But sometimes the ROI conversation can come before you start bouldering, right?
Yeah.
The mistake some of you guys have made, because I made it, is that you do calendaring or ministry planning, whatever you want to call it, and you think you're really being collaborative. So you invite everybody to bring their crap to the table, and then we're all going to throw it on the calendar, and then we're going to wrestle. The problem is you're not really being collaborative, because what you need to do is you need to take your 10-year vision, your 3-year view, if you have it, and and the things that you believe are most important, to Brandon's point, and put it on there first, and then allow the ministry. So if your next step engagement environments are that important, they need to be positioned correctly. And then the student ministry can come in, and then this can come in, and then this men's breakfast can happen. But all of those things that are of the highest priority towards engagement and life transformation should be bouldered. And those decisions can be made non-collaboratively, in my opinion. There's some of you that need to not collaborate on that and go, here's what's already been established for the next 9 to 12 months. And now we're going to work around not just what dates are available, but again, to Brandon's point, what is the proper rhythm for our church and for our people. That's why we call them boulders, because, we talk a lot about rocks, which is the stuff we want to accomplish. The boulders are kind of those big parts of the calendar that are not able to be moved, right? But they're more than just because that's a date, because it's Christmas. It's the stuff that you are not willing to move because it's so core to who you are as a church. That's why working on it with bouldering is key.
Absolutely. I know when I worked in Southern California, I believe it's also on your calendar. It's all geographic as well. It's not just, it's in different places at different times of the year. They're really important. When I worked in Southern California, the fall, and it may have changed from 12 years when I moved to Texas. The fall was when things really kicked off and got cooking. In the fall in Texas, all anyone ever does is watch football in the fall. No one comes to church. It's just the whole place shuts down. It is not a big momentum season for us, but the first of the year is. And so you got to know those. You got to figure out the patterns and the places to put those boulders and do that. So bouldering your calendar really matters. That is why the strategic movement process or strategic momentum process is so important. I just got out of a meeting where someone wanted to add something to our calendar and on their particular campus, and they said, "Oh, this is so exciting! This is this great idea. We're going to open up a campus at a cigar bar, and it's going to be great, and we're going to do all this." But it was really sideways energy, and I was just able to say, "Is that part of the 10-year? Is that part of the 3-year? Like, is that going to help us get to where we've set in motion? Is that a boulder?" And honestly, it wasn't. It was a really cool idea, but it would have just been another buffet item we added at the table that would not help us get to where we had planned in that SMP. So, all right. The next one is just a radical discipline of on-it meetings. So many of us have our regular meetings, and we encourage you, at Gramentum to have this big long plan and get out there 10 years and 5 years and 3 years and get out there in front of it and know where you're going. But you'll never get those goals accomplished. You'll never get there if you don't just stop once in a while and have a meeting and say, "Hey, we're gonna work on this thing. We're gonna step away from the day-to-day. And we're going to work on it. And like I said, you're gonna have to know your style. Your team may do better if you do that in an hour chunk every week or 30 minutes, or you might do better if it's like, no, once a month we have to go off for a day and we have to spend a day or a half day. That's why that style matters. You've got to figure out what's going to work best with your team and really get them moving forward. Everyone always wants to know, like, "Hey, when does your team meet? Do you guys meet on Tuesdays or Thursdays?" And I'm like, who cares? What really matters is your lead guy or your executive pastor or your team going to be with you and excited about where we're going? So that radical discipline of on-it meetings where you say, "Hey, we are going to look at the big picture, the big priorities. We're going to push back. Maybe you're going to have the new ideas." Who's someone's hammering on football? It's do not. Oh, okay.
Maria,
that's okay.
Lynn Cherry, she's coming hard.
I love it. Bring the noise. It's all good.
The thing about it, Yeah, the thing about it that's so key, you guys, is it's the thing you said before about intentionality, and we can pause for a second. Some of you who have instituted this can talk to it. It's one of those things again where your team wants it until you initiate it, right? And then it's like we need meetings where we talk about I need more storage space and I need more leaders and versus what are the so that's where the regular rhythm, to Brandon's point of whatever that works for you. I personally, and I'll put this out there as an editorial, I think it's hard to work on it and in it in the same. I think it can be done, and maybe you're an amazing leader and you can pull that off. But what I've always seen is the in it will always swallow up and eat the on it. And so the best thing is to take the time to actually go on it and to say we're setting that.
Absolutely. I don't know, again, just to pile on what Lee was just saying, I can't, with my team, I can't do in it and on it in the same meeting. Can't do it. And we've tried. And what happens is we're talking about the facilities person or communications person or how no one likes our artwork when we really should be talking about what the big long-term goal is. Where are we going after? And we get stuck.
The other thing that happens too, you guys, is the reality is you're going to discover that there are certain people on your team. And again, there are roles, and I get it. You have to navigate it. There are certain people on your team that are not wired for on-it conversations. And so sometimes your team structure is set up because of the way the org needs to run, but the work on it rhythm of your org. When we started really working on it at the Crossing, we actually had to change up our teams because we had our teams based on role. And over time, we discovered that our pastoral care guy is great and he does a great job, but at a seat at the lead table is not really where his sweet spot is. So we had to restructure around our need to have the right people at the table for these work on it conversations. And you may eventually find yourself there as well. Matt Warren said in the chat, and then we can move on. He said one of the keys is to change the environment sometimes for your on it meetings. In other words, if you meet in the conference room every week for your staff meeting and you're doing an on it meeting once a month or once a quarter, change it up so that it feels like this is a unique experience that we're going to have. So that's good stuff.
Yeah, I think I want to point out, and we'll get to the fourth one here in the last one. I just want to point out something that we're really hitting on. Because I know for some of you, you're like, I got this, man. We planned out. We don't even need to talk about this. But the reality is, if we're really honest, this is an area a lot of us struggle with. This whole idea of, man, really getting out there in front of things and doing that and taking the time to work on it. Just notice the language and how important language matters. Some of you are new to the call. We probably should have thrown this out there. Something we talk about Growmentum, man. We want to work on it and in it. And we say that all the time. And those are just two different spaces that we're talking about. But that language matters on your team. Like they've got to speak that language. If they're not, it so matters. They got to understand what's a boulder? What do you mean when you say boulders? What does that mean? And then they've got to know styles. If you're going to truly say, hey, this isn't a dictatorship, I really want to hear from you. Well, then it better not be. But if it is a dictatorship, own it and say, no, guys, I've already decided what we're going to do. I would love some input about how that's going to happen, how we can lay that out. But if you're going to dictate that, don't lie to your team and go, oh, I really want to hear from you. You'll lose them so quickly in this process. And that is why it's important what Lee talked about. Have people in the room that you trust, that can push back on you, and that there's that freedom there to speak. So last one is this, and then we'll talk a little bit. Collaborative communication sync up. You got to have it. You got to have a sync up. You got to have this regularly scheduled where you narrow the noise, you simplify the message toward the vision, that you're pointing people where you're going long term. That's why I love doing the strategic momentum process, because we get to work together and then figure out, man, where are we going long term, and then we get to sync up regularly and stay connected and point people toward that. One of the things I wish we had the link, Lee, we could show everyone that we kind of have a website that we use when we do this, and we get to go back and show people like, hey, this is where we're at, and we kind of keep track quarterly. Yeah, show them this dashboard. This is cool. I'm kind of going on an audible here. This was not planned. But Lee can show you guys just one example where not only do we talk about it and sync it up and communicate, but if you can visually have a plan that you put out there and say, hey, this is the plan. This is where we're going. This is what we want to do. And they can see that in that meeting. It is so helpful. So
Yeah.
man,
So
look
this
at
is
me.
this
go
is
for it.
software. Look at me. I screen shared. I got it up.
I'm in awe. I don't even know what to do.
It's all that
Walk and help.
replenishment. It's all the cortados. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a lot of our teams. If you're a current client at Growmentum, and so this is one of the parts that you get as a current client. So we have a lot of churches that are acclimating it, and so some of you have seen this, but it's basically something that we call your vision dashboard. So when you establish a 10-year vision, it's not something that you use every day, but at every work on it meeting that you have, or that's strategic, you would pull this up. Literally, I do it. We put it up on the screen. We roll through every quarter. You do a diagnosis of red, yellow, green as far as where we are in Church on Mission. Our core values are there. This church is actually working on their core values. So these are some drafts of their core values that are here. Here's their 10-year vision that stays in front. This is a church in San Francisco. I don't think Rob's on the call today. This is a 3-year view. He's in Hawaii, actually. And then this is the part that's interesting. So this is their 1-year plan. These are the 7 or 8 things they've determined together they're going to work on. And this is its current status, red, yellow, green. And then these are their quarterly rocks, which they haven't completely finished for this year. But if you go to, let's try one more while we're still on the call. I don't look at these guys' stuff all the time, so I don't know what their current status is. I mean, I guess we could go to ours. So we'll go to ours. So we use it profusely, right? So we even use it for, here's our organizational Q1 rocks. Here's our issues that we talk about. So all of that to say, it's really more about the idea that you're using this to, there's Angels mission. You're using this to make sure that you are fulfilling. Here we go. So they have their 1-year plan and their quarterly rocks that are listed here, and then the issues that they're working on in their work on it. So we encourage you to have this live so that issues that we consider work on it will get filled in every week. And so when those meetings, whatever the rhythm is, that we'll have a built-in agenda that are work on it type items. So anyway, there you go.
Love it. Hey, what I'd love to hear in the chat is how often do you guys do work on it meetings? What's the schedule for some of you? I know we can't hear from everyone, but I'd love to hear like this whole idea of work on it meetings. What is your, and if you want to just chime in on the mic, go for it. Because I think it's really interesting how different places, we recommend doing this often and doing this kind of thing, but what's really working for you?
Yeah, some of you guys have been doing this for a while, so speak up.
Yeah. I see every other week, and feel free to unmute and chime in too. Because I think it's important we share with each other what's working. So we got every other week. How long?
Angel, I'm gonna call on Derek real quick. Derek, because you guys are doing this stuff. He's a Cubs fan, but it's okay. Derek, as you guys have tried, and I know you're in it like right now, so we're not, yeah, right. But give us a little bit of sense of how it's working, and then what are the challenges that you've had to address as guys are thinking about this kind of structure.
Yeah, we typically go once a month. And Brandon was talking about just kind of the rhythms. Our team excels in when it's about an hour to an hour and a half meeting. And so we've kind of put a fun spin on it, and we call it caffeinate and concoct. And so I bribe everyone with coffee, and that's our work on it meetings. And so I try to set the agenda in advance or give them some heads up. Sometimes there's some homework that they need to come prepared with. But we just did that on Monday. We kind of planned the second half of the year with our calendar. And so they had to come prepared with various aspects, but that was how we did our work on it on that portion. Bribing helps.
What's been the biggest challenge for you? And I don't mean like train wreck, but just like what if anything continues to be the challenge with it?
Yeah, I mean, it's new. And so there's always that tendency to creep back to, oh, well, we used to do it a different way. And so just helping people to learn and think differently has been a consistent challenge, and just giving them a new tool and resource to use, like the dashboard. So we're happen to be a client of Growmentum's, but that's been super helpful, and also just helping to Brandon used that term bouldering, help people to just think differently about how we do ministry rather than just sticking Sunday to Sunday, and kind of getting on that rhythm and routine and pulling back from that. So it's just, helping to create people, getting them to engage a new rhythm.
Awesome. We had someone in the chat just ask who is new, and I apologize. We should have hit on this earlier and really clarified it. But just the difference between work on it, work in it, because it's something you'll hear at Grow Momentum all the time. It's kind of the baseline of who we are, is help you working on it, make sure you get out. And so here's what that means. So many of us, we work in it. It means and even like right now, some of you are like, oh, this call's almost over. I got to get back to the grind. I got to get this done, this done, this done. There's all the things I got to do every week, all the details, all in the weeds. I got to deal with this problem. I got to deal with this. I got to do this. And work, so that's working in it. Working on it is say, hey, I'm going to step away. Okay, our team is going to step away from the day-to-day, from all that stuff, and we are going to look at the big picture. We're going to step away and look at our goals. We're going to look at like what's out there in front of us. We're really going to get big picture. We are not going to sit there and live in the exactly. Lee said big picture versus smaller view. I think that's right on. So for those of you on the call, like we recognize, because we're all in ministry, Lee and I are both in this thing. We don't just come to you as consultants and go, hey, this is easy. You can just shut it off, working on it, working in it. We all recognize the big struggle for most of us is we spend most of our energy working in it. And then 6 months later, we realize we didn't even get to where we wanted to go. We didn't actually accomplish what we needed to do because we just were not looking at the big view, the big picture. We were all focused on the small. And people ask me all the time, when's the best time to do that? People ask me all the time, when's the best time to do an SMP and actually take our team away and take some time to do that? When the best time to do it is? Now. Like it's not, and I don't like the best time to do it is when you can't, like if you have a day and a half to do it, because you can't sit there and go, well, we'll do it at Christmas so that'll line up perfectly with this. We all know this. It never works to just sit there and put it out there and go, well, we'll figure out where we're going next year or 6 months from now. We're so busy and overwhelmed right now. That's
the work on it rhythm. It's kind of funny. Like it's the idea of like the work on it rhythm needs to be part of your work on it conversation. Yeah. Like what is the rhythm of working on it is actually part of your work on it agenda. Let me just wrap us real quick so that we can respect the time. Great job, you guys. Brandon, really, really solid stuff. Let me give a couple highlights. Number one, if you're new on the call, make sure we have your information. The easiest way for that to happen is the deck that gets sent out probably by tomorrow or end of day will have a link that will automatically enroll you in the think tank calls, which means you'll get a calendar invite and you'll get a text message to remind you with the Zoom call. So if you stumbled on this, someone invited you or whatever, and you want to get that, you want to be in that regular rhythm, you need to make sure that you do that, okay? You will get an email if you're in our system with the recording of this call and the deck that we use so well. Brandon, solid work we did together today. You can reference. The last thing I will say is when you focus on working on it, well, one of the last things, your team will rally behind it and it will create great, amazing tensions that you have yet to experience. So be warned, when you invite them into that, it will also create some tensions that you may or may not love as a leader. It will push you to lead them at a higher level because you're inviting them into conversations that are higher level conversations. So just be warned about that. Last thing, October 4th through the 6th, write it down, beginning June 1st. So in a week, we will roll out the registration for our live October Think Tank in Vegas. It's a Thursday, Friday, event, Wednesday night through Friday event that we do conversations with people that you see on this call. We have some pretty cool ideas around theming that you're going to begin to see around riding the tailwinds and resisting the headwinds, moving through the headwinds. We're going to be talking a lot about resiliency and some of those things at our October think tank, like building ministry and building ourselves for the long haul. And so Lance Witt will be with us in person, and we got a couple extra special guests that are going to come and speak to those topics. So mark it down. When the registration goes live, you'll get it. All right. Thanks, guys and gals.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much. Hope you have an amazing time. We'll hit you with the follow up and let us know if you have any questions. All right. Appreciate you guys so much. Have a good one.
Leave your Venmo for a free trip to Spain. Lee is going to be providing you. So leave your Venmo.
It's happening. happening.
It's gonna be great.